Hello friends, in this video I would like to talk with you about an issue that most new indie game developers will have to face, and that is how to finance your first project. My name is Adrian Lazar and I am creative director on Planet Alpha, an adventure that takes place on a living alien world where you have the ability to control the day and night cycle. The game combines fast platforming, puzzles, stealth and exploration with a unique art style to create an unforgettable experience, and is coming out September 4th. I'm also the owner of a small but ambitious game development studio based in Copenhagen, Denmark, and so I had to deal with the issue of how to raise money because, well, I didn't have any. Now, just to be clear, the things that I will talk about are from my own experience, and depending on your situation, they might or might not apply to you. The other thing that I want to be upfront about is that I do not have a magic formula. All I have is a story that took place over the course of 2 years and that hopefully will prove useful to you. There were 4 major events that helped me establish a business and finance my first project without any money of my own to invest. And I will talk about each of them, but first I would like to begin with a bit of a backstory so you understand why I wanted to start a game development studio in the first place, but also why I needed to find external financing. And I'll try to keep it short. I'm now almost 35 years old and I established the studio right before turning 32. I live in Copenhagen, I am married and we do not have any children. So that is my current situation. Going back a bit more, I was born in Romania and I lived most of my childhood in a small village near the Danube River where nothing ever seemed to happen. I never liked the place and I always wanted to move away. Had my first job when I was 17, doing web design for a dodgy local company, and that lasted for about a year until I had to focus on my high school graduation exam. After graduation, I moved to Bucharest and I have worked ever since, transitioning from web design to post-production and later to game development. And lastly, in 2009, I moved to Copenhagen to work for IO Interactive on the Hitman series. So at 32, when I started my game development studio, I had already worked for other people for about 14 years in 8 different companies of all sizes. And I really wanted to try something new. I always had a high job satisfaction, but for a few years that decreased constantly until a point where I kind of hated going to work. And that's when I knew that I was ready to be on my own. By that time, I was already working on Planet Alpha. So I had both the idea and the motivation. Now all I needed were the money. I grew up in a low-income family, but I never felt poor, at least not while I was little. In part because everyone around me had the same situation, and in part because my mom did a tremendous job making sure that I would have a great childhood. But this also meant that I was never able to rely on them for financial support. No family fortune to invest in my own business. And by the way, I do not regret this, and I have never been bitter about the cards that I've been dealt. On the contrary, I'm very happy that what me and my wife have is made by us two without anyone's help. I would take the sense of self-accomplishment at any time over the easy way in life. Fast forward to 2014. I had a game that I wanted to make and I was ready to take the jump and start my own studio. Copenhagen, although a lovely city, it's not the cheapest place to live. So I had to find a way to keep having an income. The way I saw it, I had 2 options: a Kickstarter campaign or government support. Kickstarter is a good option for many, but for me it has 2 main issues. One is that, at least at that time, you had to offer some sort of physical reward, and that wasn't something that I really wanted to get into. But the main issue that I have with Kickstarter, and I know some will disagree, is that the backers, understandably, I would say, have a sense of entitlement over your project because you are using their money. I'm sure this is different for every project, but having been worked before on a game that was successfully backed on Kickstarter, I got to see the downsides of going this route. And lastly, a Kickstarter is a very public campaign, and I didn't want to risk losing my job if I had a failed campaign. So I decided against this option because I wanted to ensure that nobody could control the creative part of my game. The other option that I had was government support. At that time, you could apply twice a year, and although the money wouldn't have been enough for the entire production, they would have been enough for a vertical slice. Unfortunately, my application was rejected every time I tried, and that was that. It was now more than a year since I started working on my game, and I was still not able to raise any money. But two important events were about to happen in the course of a month. The first main event was getting Sony's attention. From the moment I started working on the game, my target was to have it on consoles alongside with PC. A console release, at least back then, was like a seal of quality, and that's what I wanted from the start, to make a special game that will be released on every platform. At the beginning of 2015, I managed to put together a short prototype, and I was quite happy with how that turned out. So I decided to give it a shot and send it to all the console manufacturers. The only one who responded was Shahid Ahmad, at that time director of strategic content for Sony Computer Entertainment Europe. He told me that he really enjoyed the demo, and he offered to send me a PlayStation dev kit and to open a development account with them. Now, for him, I was probably just another indie dev that he brought to the PlayStation platform, but for me this was huge. And I'm not talking about the dev kit or the dev account. It will pass years until I will be able to make use of either of those. No, for me it was a confirmation that I was on the right track, and that motivated me to work twice as hard and improve the prototype further. So I continued improving the game, and not long after, the second main event happened, and that was receiving the Unreal Development Grant. $15,000, no strings attached. Half of them went to taxes, but even so, it was a pretty big amount for me. It allowed me to submit the game for Indie Prize Singapore edition, and the improved prototype did quite well. Did so well actually that it won 3 awards for Best in Show, Most Promising Game in Development, and Best Game Art. I couldn't believe it, and I will never forget that evening. And the awards represented the third main event that allowed me to establish a studio without any money of my own to invest. Back in Copenhagen, I was now more motivated than ever to get things rolling, so I started to think about a publisher deal or getting an investor. But which one to go with? I had no experience with either, but luckily I knew someone who did. Hey Thomas. The way I understood it was the following. A publisher would be able to control me creatively, while an investor would be able to control me financially. It is an oversimplification, of course, but even so, for me at that time, the most important thing was to retain full creative control. And so I chose to approach an investor. At that time in Denmark, the only investor interested in video games was Capnova through Alan Rasmussen, which over the years invested in many successful game companies like Playdead and Cyborg Games. But I was a bit hesitant because a few years back, together with a friend, we applied to Capnova for another game, and after a bit of back and forth, they turned us down. Still, I didn't have anything to lose, or any other option for that matter, so I gave it a shot. After a few months, the fourth and last main event happened. The contract was signed, and I was able to quit my job and established my own game development studio. At the beginning of 2016, I hired 2 people, and now in total of 7 people worked on developing Planet Alpha. In 2017, we signed a publishing deal with Team 17, but that should be the subject of another video. If anyone is interested in hearing how that came to happen, please let me know in the comments. So those were the 4 main events that allowed me to finance my game and establish a development studio without any money of my own to invest. And what a trip on the memory lane that was. Now that I think about it, things didn't happen in a smooth, uniform manner. From 2013, when I began working on the game, and until things started to move in the right direction, almost 2 years have passed without any major development. Then, at the beginning of 2015, things started to fall into place, and in a matter of months, everything was up and running. Sony's interest, which confirmed that I was on the right track, the Unreal Development Grant, which allowed me to participate in Indie Prize Singapore, the awards that the prototype won there, which helped with the investor, and lastly, Capnova's interest in investing in the game. If I would have gave up during that time when nothing seemed like was going to happen, who knows how things would have turned out. So I guess my advice is to be perseverant and to take advantage of every opportunity. You never know what would get things in motion, so try to do as many things as possible. As I mentioned in the beginning, I do not have a magic solution. For me, it didn't happen overnight, and I am still at the beginning of my journey. Our first game is still to be released, and in this industry, it is impossible to predict anything. Regardless of its success, however, I am proud that I managed to start something without any handouts, and that I was able to hire a few people to help me create what I hope it will be received as a special game. Planet Alpha is coming out September 4th on PC, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. You can wishlist it on Steam now, and I have placed a link in the description. If you found this video interesting, let me know and I'll do my best to record some more. Taking a game from a personal project to a team effort to a console release taught me quite a few things, and I would love to share them with you. Thanks for watching.